recording it. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. This is April 12th, yes. And this is the Object Storage Working Group meeting. We have some agenda items today. So first one is your, Matthias.
I was actually wondering, should we start with Jacob's point because it's more important because it's attached to a date, and I did the point I brought up. We can do it like later.
So you want to start with point number 4?
Yeah, let's start with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So back to you, Jacob.
Hi. Yeah. So we had this brave moment where we said we're going to deprecate background uploads. And we got the deprecation message in on time for the 15.0 release. And that's great, but we're not done there, and we need to do something so that we can wrap it up. And we have had some thoughts floating about how to make this. So we sort of did things in the wrong order. Like there was a deadline, so we first said, okay, we're going to make the deadline, then we're going to figure out how to do it. And now we still need to figure out how to do it and have a story for people when they reach 15.0. And I've been trying some things of how to deal with this. So the problem really with we're actually not literally, I don't know if we're literally deprecating background uploads, but another way to phrase the problem is support for Rackspace and OpenStack. Because those are two object storage providers we support now, where we don't have direct upload support. So if we want to say no more background uploads, we need to have a migration path for the people who are on those providers, because everybody who is not on those providers should be fine by now. There also was an issue in the past with S3, where our S3 client wasn't good enough to deal with certain problems, but I think that that has been resolved already. So I think to be rid of background uploads, we need to have a migration path for Rackspace and OpenStack. Everyone still with me?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember because I think that, oh, wow, so my Siri started talking over. Yeah, whatever. So yeah, I was saying, I'm trying to remember what happened here, but if I remember correctly, at least OpenStack should have an S3 compatibility layer, which in the past we said, if you enable that, you should be able to switch to direct upload. Then I think no one ever tested this, but
that's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I tried looking into that because I thought if we're going to say just turn on the S3 compatibility layer, I should at least have a link to where it says how to do that. And I can't find that. And I spent probably at least an hour Googling for how do I turn on, like, how does it even work, the S3 compatibility layer in OpenStack? And it's very not obvious. So it feels a bit disingenuous to send users into the woods and say, just turn on this thing that we don't even know where it is. What I did see is that there is so OpenStack is a very big thing. It's not just about object storage. The object storage part is called Swift, but it's basically a whole infrastructure as a service stack. It also has an EC2 compatibility layer. So I think you need to go into the EC2 compatibility layer to create fake Amazon credentials. And then you need to run an S3 middleware, which is some sort of Python middleware on your Swift web server thing, and then use the fake EC2 credentials, and then you can use that. That's sort of, I got very vague hints about that is how it works. So but I'm not even able to test it. I don't know how to install this thing. I tried reading the installation documentation for OpenStack, and it was terrifying. So if I would have to sit down and set up OpenStack and go through the process myself, that would also, yeah, that would be a lot of work. And I guess one way to do it would be to create an account with the cloud provider that offers OpenStack and do it that way. So it just it didn't seem very clean. And it's also not clear to me what status is of Rackspace cloud files. Rackspace uses OpenStack, so you can have OpenStack Swift buckets on Rackspace, but they also have their own custom API, which I'm guessing predates their adoption of OpenStack. And we support both these things. And it'd be really nice if you could just have one bucket and say, I access it through the Rackspace Cloud Files API, or I access it through the Swift API or through the S3 compatibility layer, and everything is still there. But I have no idea if it works like that, if these things are in the same namespace or not. So and maybe there are nice, clean answers, but I haven't found them yet. So what I considered instead was to use a sort of cloud rsync tool. There's something called rclone, which is an open source tool that tries to be rsync for cloud providers, which is kind of nice. So you can you configure, you install it locally, and you configure a bunch of endpoints in a config file, and you then have credentials for that. And then you can say, sync this bucket on this provider to that bucket on that provider. And then it makes it happen. So if we were going to tell people to just migrate their data, I think I would tell them to do it with rclone. And I played with that a little bit using Minio and local directories, because you can also sync into a local directory. So I think it's the right tool for the job, and I think it would work. So that seemed like the best path forward to me. But then I had another interesting problem, which is, how can you be confident that you've updated your object storage configuration correctly? Well, there's a number of problems. I mean, one of the problems is, what if somebody has configured 12 different buckets on OpenStack? Because what is the number 12? How many buckets do we support?
I think 14 now.
14.
But we're going to deprecate one. Yeah, because it's increased over time. We removed one during the working group, but another one was added.
We need a number. Let's say 10. So somebody has configured 10 different OpenStack buckets for 10 different features. If you want to write a good guide for how to migrate them, then you need to touch on all of them, or you need to be vague and say, go into your GitLab config file and look up the bucket that belongs to this thing and update its settings. But then even after you've, there's a very annoying failure mode if you're trying to do this data migration, because what if you have an old bucket and you migrate all your data to a new bucket, and you mess something up with the configuration and half your system is still writing to the old bucket? How do you find out? When do you find out? Also, like, if you do a cutover, how do you even know if your system is using the new bucket? Because the old bucket still has all your data in it. And when I was experimenting with this, I was using image attachments on nodes, because those are very easy to check. I just go into a clean GitLab server, create issue, grab a random image, drag and drop, and I can see if it's working or not. And if I change the settings, I get a 404 on the image, so I know the image is gone. But that is very specific to image uploads. Like, how do you test that you migrated merge request diffs correctly? How do you test that you configured LFS blobs correctly? How do you test that you configured artifacts correctly? Do we expect people to step through 10 features and test them by hand and make sure that they're still working?
Do we have any sense of who those affected users or customers are? Could we reach out to one or two of them and maybe work with them to see like how they've been using it and how we could help them migrate it? And then maybe just, hope that this might translate to all the other OpenStack users as well. Because it wasn't that many, right? At least according to our data, it was like literally, 2 handful, like a dozen or so. At least according to I don't know, it's not 100% accurate, our usage ping data, but it was not many compared to thousands of S3 users.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would expect that the way the usage ping works means that we can't trace it back and see where it came from.
We need to go with support. So if support knows that we have customers on subscription plans with support enabled, and they know they're running on one of those providers, otherwise.
Right. Now that I think about it, there was a while ago, but there is an internal dashboard that is not publicly accessible where I think it includes I think you can opt out of it as well, but if you're not opted out, it should include the URL of where that installation is hosted as well. And I think there's some correlation IDs that you can correlate these log events back, but it was a while ago, so I don't know if that's still around.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if it helps, because the copying the data with rclones is actually really straightforward. But we're not going to sit down with them and migrate each of them. I think that would be a hard promise to make.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
I meant just like as an example with maybe one of them that maybe we then hope is representative of how the process works, just so that we have someone to actually test it out with an actual installation.
Yeah, but still, I'm thinking why you are just explaining this, Jakob, right? So, Jakob, so the thing is that the system, because of how we store those information in GitLab itself, the rclone path seems trivial in the sense that the data on the database will still be okay because we generate the URL, mangling the system configuration plus what's stored in our database. But this means that you can't really do a live migration here, like we used to do when we developed the migration path from local storage to remote storage, because in that way,
yeah.
Okay,
what I started drafting in that guide was to say do a sync while the system is active. So you have a first sync, and then take a maintenance window and do a second one, and then you know that your users aren't writing new data, and then turn the system back on. Then you at least don't have to copy everything. You still have to list everything, of course, right? So it's not going to be very fast. But I think that would be a reasonable way to do a migration like this. So yeah, the difficult thing, the way I see it is, it stays a bit vague and hand wavy, and just use rclone and it'll work out. And I can't make it a whole lot better than that, or I'm not sure how to make it much better than that. And I don't know if we're comfortable, or if maybe it is appropriate to hand it to our users like that. Maybe it isn't.
I don't know either. And I mean, I definitely appreciate the empathy for users here, but we also need to keep in mind that this came back as a community contribution, if I remember correctly, the original implementation for this. This is something we have never tested, we have never worked with. So I would be surprised if the expectation here is that we would like guide, you know, all of our users exactly how to migrate away from an object storage system that we're not using. So I don't know, like maybe it's a question of expectation management, but I think anything we help in terms of, you know, pointing the right direction is great, but to lay out like a very detailed path for how that would work for a particular customer.
I think it also depends. It depends on the customer. So maybe we need to go to support and ask if they know anybody who's using OpenStack or Rackspace Cloud Files, because in practice, not all users are the same. And if a customer with a big account complains, then we're going to end up spending more time helping them than we would if the people who are affected are not paying money.
No, definitely. And also, I don't think we need to be super hasty. I mean, we published a deprecation notice with 14.9, and we intend to remove it for 15.0, but not everyone needs to immediately update to 15.0, right, the day it's released. So it's not like on the release date of 15.0, users will be affected by this, right? It's only if they try to update.
But we don't have a lot of leeway there, I think, because we only do security patches up to a point.
Months.
Yeah, right. No, for sure. But I mean, I'm saying that, I mean, that's still another 3 months.
And a
right?
user may have another reason for wanting to upgrade to 15.0, and then we block them because we say you can't, but sorry, we don't have an answer on what to do. So I suppose Well, there's also one very different path we can take that I want to bring up, which is to implement direct upload support for these two providers. Because then we don't have to deprecate them.
Yes, or yeah, okay. Well, I was thinking, so this is a problem of uploading, not of getting things out of the object storage. So maybe a third option could be, I don't know how many of you remember, but basically we have this, maybe it's a nightmare as well, but we have this flag on the database, which is the storage, which I think 1 is local or 0 is objects, remote object storage, whatever. So we could have a third value, which is this legacy storage. So that the point is that you want to upgrade. Now you have, basically we're going to, let's say, update all of your entries in the database from remote to remote legacy, whatever it is. And so you can still retrieve them, but you have to provide a configuration with a new supported object storage so that you can keep running the system, because the new stuff will end up on this new provider. I'm not saying that this is something we can easily implement in one milestone, because 15.0 is...
Yeah,
right?
it sounds a little bit like the proposal I made where we can keep some data in an old location and write data to a new location, which I still like, but which is not something you just quickly come up with. So I'm not sure we're in a position to implement that. If we did that, I don't think we should touch all the database records, but we should have the logic the other way around. If you have the old flag, you have in the old system. If you have the new flag, you're in the new system. Another problem with updating the database is that whether people are in this state of having an issue with OpenStack depends on GitLab YAML and not in the database. So we shouldn't encode the current state of GitLab YAML into the database, because the admin can come in and change GitLab YAML, and then all these database rows are wrong.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but these things are orthogonal, and I think they, if we make them not orthogonal, then we create trouble. So I didn't really prepare this well. One option is to stick with this rclone story and to ask support if they know anybody who needs more help with it. I guess the risk with this rclone thing is that somebody wants to upgrade and they get stuck and they have a hard time, and then yeah. And then the problem ranges from empathy with the person having a hard time to them giving us a hard time through their support contract. And we don't know which it would be.
But to pick up your point from earlier again about adding support for OpenStack and Rackspace in Workhorse, how have we answered these questions in the past? I mean, I guess like having support for S3 compatible providers seems like a no-brainer, but
well,
yeah,
that was a big deal, actually. That was a big deal. That we were, for some reason, we started out trying to avoid this, and it was only because there was some very specific S3 feature we wanted to support and we couldn't support otherwise that Stan added the ability to do this. Okay, so here's a crazy path forward that I don't know how people what people will think. We could give Workhorse the path to GitLab YAML. And then Workhorse can read all the Rails config, including the OpenStack config. And then it becomes a whole lot easier to do direct uploads things. If we don't do that, then the Workhorse config file needs to have a section to support Rackspace credentials or OpenStack credentials, and people need to fill that in and all that.
Or could we hand it down in the authorization header? Like, because Rails knows those details, right? And we do the authorize call up front. I'm actually not sure how it works
if those
currently
supports
with-
pre-signed URLs, then we would be sort of on the same level as where we are now. If they don't, then we are sharing a lot of credentials that maybe we don't want to be sharing through that channel.
Okay. Yeah, it's the implementation difficulties are one question, but another question is today it's OpenStack. You know, what is it going to be tomorrow? I mean, I think we also need to kind of ask ourselves.
Yeah, someone was asking
if
about
there's, like-
Alibaba file storage, which is kind of
Right.
S3, but then they had some weird behaviors on other, I think MD5 headers for ETAG. So
it adds maintenance overhead for us as well. This is a commitment we are making to support this, right? And sure, like if this comes in, it always looks very appealing, right? If there's a merge request, hey, we're using OpenStack, here's an MR that adds this functionality, you know, it's kind of like, well, good, now we get this functionality for free, but then we're kind of sitting on it and we're not using it. We don't know if it works. We're not testing it. You know, it's just
Well,
like,
we don't know if much of it works because we're only using GCS. We also don't know if our S3 stack works or if our Azure stack works.
That's a fair point, yeah. Well, that's actually, but to Min.io, we use the S3 client, right? So there, I think there's still some cover, but I get your point. Yeah, it's
One of the problems.
I think Jason was trying to speak or
Sorry.
say something, but I couldn't hear him, just hear his voice moving. So
Okay, so apparently my mic was being a pain. Apologies.
yeah.
Thanks for calling that out. We do know that AWS and related AWS do function. We have a very large number of vocal customers that would tell us if that was not working, as well as we do have the functionality to actively and do accurately test it.
But is it in our CI?
Yeah.
Okay, because
What
At
about
least it's
Azure?
a distribution CI.
if
We
vocal
actually deploy
customers
on the multiple
complain about
clusters
it,
and
then we're
test
too
it.
late.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, one of my points at the beginning of this working group was that we had this large number of S3 or object storage like implementation in the wild. And basically some of them are also stated in documentations and things like that. But then if you ask engineers, there's no way for them to test those things. Or even if you think about our QA is not testing all of those things that we are supposed to support. So if you support something, we should have at least QA stage.
It would be nice to get rid of OpenStack and Rackspace because we've found out that they're very, they're hardly used, and it does add a maintenance cost. But yeah, who can decide if how good our story has to be? For so if we do this Arclone story, like how good does the story have to be?
Marine, if in doubt. Can we? I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, it's almost like a product question in a sense, right? Because we're removing a feature that was part of our product, and now the question is how abruptly do you want to just yank out the rug, or do we just want to make that smoother?
Well, thanks for the discussion, everyone. I think the first thing I'll do is find out who to reach out to in support and see if we know anybody through support who's using OpenStack, and then we can maybe, like, if we know nobody, then we can be we can keep things a bit simpler, I suppose.
Yeah, I think this is a good first step. And then based on what we get out of this, we can make a decision about how detailed the plan has to be.
And people in support would also be able to give feedback on whether the documentation makes sense. Because if it becomes a problem, then somebody from support will be the first one to be confronted with it, and they will look at the documentation we're writing. And if they say, oh, I can do this with Arclone, then
there is a support team member in this working group. So I don't know, maybe you can reach out.
I should ask them first.
Yeah, because maybe it's more aware of what we're talking about. And
yeah, that's why they're in the working group. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll ask feedback on my merge request from them. Good. Thanks.
So we are yeah, almost at time. So yeah, Matthias, you have the next point. Let's see where
Yeah, we can. We're not gonna be able to cover that today. I just thought at this point it might be maybe more efficient to synchronously go through some of the documentation we have looked at. We had like worked on before, and some of it is, I think, already not correct anymore, at least to the extent I understand it. So I was hoping that we could just do that on one of these calls instead. But it doesn't have to be today. It's probably not enough time. Oh yeah, and another point I had was, I'll just read it out and then maybe you can think on that. Because of this background upload deprecation, if that switch disappears, I actually noticed that direct upload defaults to false. So if background uploads are not available anymore for object storage and direct upload defaults to false, that's not already a great place to be in, right? I mean, we should then think about, do we want to default this to on or remove it altogether?
They should be removed together, because there's no, if direct upload is false, it doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. So I don't
thought it would fall
details
back
why.
to just like upload to the Rails controller then. Doesn't it?
Oh, maybe you're right, because it was a kind of a 3-state situation based on actual implementation plus 2 configuration options. Well,
I'm not sure
Yeah.
what, if direct upload is false, doesn't that imply that we first create an entry with storage local and then a Sidekick job that
no,
updates it?
no. So this is Matthias' point, is that
That's
if direct
background
upload is false, it goes on disk, and that's fine. But then if background upload is true, then it goes through Sidekick. But if it's false, it goes from the controller.
Yeah, and it will be gone, right? I mean, background upload will just not exist. So then the question is, what does it do if the only options are direct upload and something
Its
else?
carrier
and
wave
direct
will
upload is
attach it.
false? Yeah.
Okay, we also still allow that.
I'm afraid, yes.
Honestly, if you have a very small GitLab installation, that might be okay, right? From a performance standpoint, you know, if I don't know, if you have like a single node GitLab or something, and maybe it talks to MinIO or whatever, then not having direct upload enabled, and just always uploading through the Rails controller might be okay.
There's a timeout problem here. The problem it lies in timeouts because
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 30 seconds. What's the default? 30
30
seconds, I think.
Seconds, yeah.
I think it's 1 minute.
Well, whatever.
Yeah.
So the point is
It kind
that
of depends.
yeah, while the transfer is in progress, is not yet counting on controller time because it's transfer time. So if you can write on the final destination while you receive the body, it counts. Of you're not already in the controller timeout limit. But once you completed streaming and now you are in the controller, you have to, in that case, upload, because you have direct upload false within the timeout limits.
Yeah, so if you just remove that, then you don't want to end up with this controller upload thing, because right now people can handle large uploads via Sidekick, and then they all of a sudden get a timeout.
Okay, so as I said, we are at time. David point is really interesting. I encourage who wants to review that thing. I think that this is good. Some of the point that is making about the code duplication, we can work around them or think through if there are other alternatives, but also the idea of, please read the merge request, and if you have some ideas, just we can discuss on this async. And yeah, so that's all for today. Thank you for the call and see you soon.
See you. Bye-bye.